I stood in the rain staring at the house I once called home. My clothes were soaked, my hands were shaking, and all I could think was, why? The grass was covered with pieces of my life, family photos, my favorite blanket, and even the quilt my grandmother made for me when I was a child. Everything that used to mean comfort now looked like trash scattered by strangers. I tried the front door, but the key didn't work. The lock had been changed. For a moment, I thought maybe there was a mistake. Maybe Ethan had lost his mind, and this was all some weird misunderstanding. But then I saw it, the note taped to the door. 3 words written in his handwriting, "Don't come back." The words hit harder than the cold rain. My heart sank so deep I could barely breathe. We had built this house together. Every wall, every room had a memory. I remembered painting the kitchen yellow because he said it felt warm. I remembered the nights we planned our future here. And now, it felt like all of that had been erased in a single moment. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching the rain ruin everything I owned. My phone buzzed again and again, texts from neighbors, work emails, but not one message from Ethan. His truck was gone. His side of the garage was empty. The silence from him was louder than any explanation could ever be. Finally, I picked up what I could, a few pieces of clothing, a photo of my parents, and my laptop bag. I didn't even know where to go. I couldn't face anyone, not yet. The only thing I knew was that the life I left behind 3 days ago was gone. I sat in my car, staring at the dark house through the windshield. I could almost see us sitting on the porch, laughing and drinking coffee. I could almost hear him saying, "This is home." But now that word felt like a lie. As the rain kept falling, I realized that I had a choice: stay there and cry over what was lost, or get in the car and drive away. So I drove. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get away from the pain sitting on that lawn. Somewhere between the tears and the thunder, a strange calm settled in. Maybe this was the end of something I was never meant to hold on to. Maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something I didn't see coming. That night, I parked in a quiet lot and tried to sleep in my car. The rain tapped softly on the windows like it was whispering, "You'll be okay." I didn't believe it yet, but deep down, I wanted to. Because even when everything you've built, before everything fell apart, my life with Ethan looked perfect from the outside. We had a nice house in a quiet neighborhood in North Carolina. Our weekends were filled with morning walks, grocery runs, and dinner with his family. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I thought we were building something strong, a future together. Ethan and I met at work. He was confident, funny, and had this calm way of making people trust him. I fell for him quickly. After 2 years of dating, we got married in a small backyard ceremony. It wasn't fancy, but it was beautiful. At least, that's how I remember it. His sister Grace stood beside me that day, smiling wide and calling me the sister she never had. I believed her. Over time, I started noticing little things that didn't sit right. Grace always seemed too involved in our marriage. She'd show up unannounced, just to hang out, but always ended up in private talks with Ethan. If I asked what it was about, she'd say, "Family stuff, nothing important." Ethan would brush it off too, saying I worried too much. I wanted to trust him, so I did. We started saving money for a baby. I wanted to start a family more than anything. Ethan agreed, or at least pretended to. We'd talk about names, future bedrooms, and schools. It made me happy to think we were finally in the same place in life. But behind those warm moments, there were cracks I ignored. Ethan's phone was always face down. He said it was out of habit, but I noticed how quick he was to pick it up whenever Grace texted. They messaged constantly, day and night. He told me they were just close because of their childhood bond. I told myself it was harmless. I didn't want to be that jealous wife. Looking back, I see how blind I was. There were small signs: missing money from our account, sudden arguments over nothing, and nights when Ethan stayed late at work. When I questioned him, he'd smile and pull me into a hug, saying, "You think too much, babe." His calm tone made me feel guilty for doubting him. Grace also started changing toward me. The friendly sister act faded. She'd make comments like, "You're lucky Ethan puts up with your moods," or, "You don't know how much he sacrifices for you." I tried to laugh them off, but each word cut a little deeper. Slowly, I began feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. Still, I held on. I loved him too much to believe he'd ever hurt me. I thought we were just going through a rough patch like every couple does. I didn't know that while I was dreaming of a family, they were already making plans that didn't include me. It's strange how love can blind you. You can sleep next to someone every night and never realize they're slowly building a world where you don't belong. Falls apart, there's always a small part of you that still hopes for tomorrow. When Ethan told me about the work retreat in Chicago, I didn't think much of it. My manager had mentioned it weeks before, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. It was short, just 3 days, and mostly about team building. I didn't like leaving home for long, but Ethan insisted. He said, "You need a break. Go enjoy yourself for once." He even helped me pack, folding my clothes neatly and reminding me not to forget my charger. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I know better. The morning I left, he kissed me goodbye. It wasn't like the usual soft, warm kiss before work. It felt quick, almost forced. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just tired. I didn't want to start the trip with worries. I told him I'd call once I landed, and he smiled, saying, "Can't wait to hear from you." The first day of the retreat went smoothly. I laughed with coworkers, tried to relax, and even called Ethan that night. He answered, but his tone was distracted. "Everything's fine," he said, "just busy." I told him I missed him, and he said he missed me too, but it didn't sound real. By the second day, something felt off. My texts went unanswered. My calls went straight to voicemail. I tried telling myself maybe he was asleep, maybe his phone died. But the silence grew heavier with each hour. That uneasy feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. On the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and took an early flight home. I didn't even tell Ethan I was coming back. I thought maybe I'd surprise him. Maybe all my fears were in my head. I kept imagining walking in and seeing him smile, saying he'd missed me. But when I turned onto our street, everything went cold. From a distance, I saw something spread across our front lawn. As I drove closer, I realized what it was: my things. Boxes, clothes, photos, even the framed picture from our wedding day. My heart dropped. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but then I saw the locks had been changed. The blinds were drawn. His truck was gone. It didn't make sense. I stood there for a long time, the sound of my heartbeat louder than the cars passing by. I called his phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. That's when I noticed the note on the door. 3 words. "Don't come back." I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, numb, staring at the house we built together. I had left for 3 days, and somehow he had erased me completely. It was in that moment, standing in the rain with my suitcase beside me, that I realized my life had changed forever. Everything I thought I knew, love, loyalty, home, had been nothing more than a lie waiting to end. I spent the first night after coming home in my car, parked a few blocks away from the house. I couldn't bring myself to leave yet. I kept hoping that maybe Ethan would call, maybe there was some mistake. But the phone stayed silent. The next morning, I went to grab coffee from the small shop at the corner, and that's where I ran into Mrs. Taylor, our neighbor. She looked nervous when she saw me. Her eyes darted around before she finally said, "Honey, you don't know, do you?" My stomach tightened. "Know what?" I asked. She hesitated, then sighed. "Ethan told everyone you left him, that you ran off with another man." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat burned, and my hands started to shake. She went on quietly. "He moved Grace and her boyfriend in the day after you left. Said he needed help around the house." It felt like someone had punched the air out of me. Grace, his sister, the person I'd treated like family, living in my house with her boyfriend, while my things sat outside in the rain. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Mrs. Taylor patted my arm softly. "I'm sorry, dear." I didn't believe a word he said, but people talk. I thanked her, holding back tears, and walked away before I broke down in front of her. My legs felt weak. Everything I thought was true had crumbled. I called Ethan again, but his phone was still off. I didn't bother trying Grace. I didn't trust what I might say if she picked up. Later that day, I called a lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to understand what I could do. The lawyer listened carefully and then said something that stuck with me. "Don't act out of anger. Play it smart. Not loud." He explained that my name was still on the deed, meaning half the house legally belonged to me. Changing the locks without my consent was illegal. Ethan could pretend all he wanted, but the law was still on my side. It gave me a small bit of comfort, though not enough to ease the pain. That night, I parked near the house again, watching from a distance. The lights were on, and through the window I saw them, Ethan, Grace, and her boyfriend, sitting at the dining table, laughing like nothing had happened. It was a sight that cut deep. The man I loved, the woman I trusted, both acting like I never existed. Tears rolled down my face as I realized how cruel betrayal can be when it comes from those closest to you. I wanted to scream, to bang on the door, to make them see what they'd done. But my lawyer's words echoed in my head. "Play it smart, not loud." So I drove away. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them destroy me quietly. I would wait, plan, and when the time was right, I'd take back everything they tried to steal. As I drove away from the house, my mind was numb, but deep down, I knew exactly where I was going. There was one place Ethan didn't know about, the small lake cabin my father had helped me buy before I married him. It was my quiet backup plan, my just-in-case place, as Dad used to call it. At the time, I thought it was unnecessary. I loved Ethan and never imagined I'd need it. But Dad always said, "A woman should have something that's only hers, a place no one can take away." Those words echoed in my head as I drove through the night. The drive was long and quiet, 3 hours of empty highways and my thoughts replaying everything that had happened. By the time I reached the familiar dirt road that led to the lake, the sun was beginning to rise. The air was cold, but the sight of the cabin brought a strange comfort. It looked exactly the same, small, old, but peaceful. For the first time in days, I felt safe. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the still water. I remembered how Dad and I had painted the porch one summer. He told me it was good to have a place that didn't depend on anyone else. I never thought I'd end up hiding there, but that morning, it felt like the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust covered the furniture, and the air smelled like wood and rain. Everything was quiet. I dropped my bags and sat on the old couch, letting out a shaky breath. The silence felt heavy, but it was mine. No one could throw me out here. No one could change the locks. Over the next few hours, I started to make the place livable again. I opened the windows, cleaned the counters, and found some old canned food in the kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I didn't cry that day. Maybe I was too tired, or maybe I'd already run out of tears. All I could think about was how different my life had become in just a few days. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the reflection of the moon on the lake. The quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I finally had space to breathe, to think, to plan my next step. Ethan thought he had taken everything from me, but he didn't know about this place. He didn't know that while he was building his lies, I had built something real, something that belonged only to me. As the wind rustled through the trees, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad." For the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I didn't. The first few weeks at the cabin were quiet. Too quiet sometimes. I spent most days trying to get used to being alone again. The pain of what Ethan did still lingered, but the silence helped me heal. Every morning, I made coffee and sat by the lake, watching the water move gently under the wind. It became my little routine, one that slowly brought me peace. At first, I felt lost. I didn't know what to do with all the anger and sadness inside me. But then I reminded myself that I still had my job. I worked remotely, so I set up a small workspace by the window and started taking on projects again. It gave me purpose, something steady to hold on to when everything else had fallen apart. The quiet evenings became my time to think. I began writing things down, not about revenge or pain, but about what I wanted next in life. For years, my world had revolved around Ethan and his needs. I had stopped talking to my friends because he didn't like them. I stopped visiting my family because he said they didn't understand us. So I reached out again. One by one, I called old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were surprised, some were distant at first, but most were kind. They listened. They reminded me that I wasn't the weak, broken person Ethan made me believe I was. With every conversation, I felt a piece of myself come back. Days turned into weeks, and I began to feel normal again. I fixed things around the cabin, went on walks, and even laughed a few times. There was a lightness in me I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't thinking about getting even or proving anything. I just wanted peace. My plan wasn't revenge, it was recovery. But peace never lasts forever. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a work call when my phone started buzzing. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in months, Grace. For a moment, I froze. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to hang up, to let her words go unheard. But curiosity won. When I picked up, I heard her voice shaking. "Please," she said softly. "I need your help." I didn't say anything at first. The sound of her crying brought back every memory. The lies, the betrayal, the way she and Ethan had laughed inside my house. "What happened?" I finally asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Ethan's gone. He took the money and left. The house is in trouble." For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just stared out at the lake, the water calm and still. In that silence, something shifted inside me. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger either. Just a deep, quiet understanding. The storm I had escaped was finally falling on. And this time, I didn't need to lift a finger. Know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't done yet. Grace's voice trembled as she tried to speak. I could hear her crying, struggling to find the right words. "He's gone," she said between sobs. "Ethan's gone. He took everything." For a moment, I just sat there, holding the phone, letting her words sink in. It felt strange hearing her sound so broken. This was the same woman who had laughed in my home, who helped throw me out of my own life. I kept my voice calm. "What do you mean he took everything?" She sniffled. "The money, the savings, all of it. The mortgage hasn't been paid in months. The bank sent a notice. They're taking the house. Please, you have to help us. You know the system. Maybe you can fix it. It's still partly in your name, right?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. She called it the family home, the same house where she watched my life fall apart. For months, she lived there like I never existed, and now she wanted me to save it for her. "Grace," I said quietly, "you want me to help save the house that you and Ethan threw me out of?" Her voice cracked. It wasn't my idea. He told me you were never coming back. He said you left him for someone else. I didn't know what to believe. That lie again. The same story Ethan told everyone. I could almost see him smirking while spinning his version of the truth, making me the villain. But now the game had turned. I'm sorry, she continued, her voice small. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, I don't know what to do. For a moment, I felt something, maybe pity, maybe the last trace of who I used to be. But then I remembered that night in the rain, my things scattered across the lawn, and her standing by his side silent. She hadn't tried to stop him. She hadn't even called to ask if I was okay. I took a deep breath. Grace, I think you'll figure it out, I said softly. You always do. She cried harder. Please, I'm begging you. But I stayed quiet. My silence was the only power I had left, and I wasn't going to waste it on people who had already shown me what I meant to them. After a long pause, she whispered, So that's it? You're just going to let it happen? Yes, I said simply. I'm letting it happen. I ended the call and stared out at the lake. The sun was setting, the sky painted in gold and orange. For the first time in months, I felt calm. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, and I didn't seek revenge. I just let the world balance itself. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything you could ever say. And in that quiet moment, I realized, after that phone call, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream, argue, or beg for anything. My silence had already started the kind of revenge that didn't need shouting. Ethan thought he'd taken everything from me, but he had forgotten one small detail. The house was still partly mine. And that meant I still had control over what happened. I contacted my lawyer the next morning. He had been following the case quietly since the beginning, and when I told him about the foreclosure notice, he said calmly, It's time to make your move. With his help, I legally removed my name from the property, but not before selling my share. It wasn't a random sale. I knew exactly who I wanted to sell it to, Daniel. He was an old friend from college who worked in real estate and owed me a favor from years back. I called him and explained everything. He listened quietly, then said, If this helps you close that chapter, consider it done. Within a week, all the paperwork was complete. On paper, Daniel became the new owner of my share. He didn't tell anyone, not the neighbors, not Ethan, not even the bank. It was clean, silent, and perfectly legal. Ethan and Grace had no idea what was coming. They probably still believed they could talk their way out of the foreclosure, or that I'd step in to save the house. But I didn't. A month later, Daniel received confirmation from the bank that the house was officially under repossession. Since he now owned my portion, he had the authority to act as part owner and finalize the process. Ethan and Grace received the notice shortly after, 30 days to vacate. Grace tried calling me again. I didn't answer. Then came a text from an unknown number. It was Ethan. He wrote, You can't do this. We'll fix it. Just talk to me. I read it once and deleted it. There was nothing to fix. From the outside, it might have looked cold, but I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was doing it to close a door that should have been locked long ago. They had made choices, cruel, selfish choices, and now they were facing the cost of them. I didn't need to lift a hand or raise my voice. The law and time did it for me. When Daniel called to confirm that they had officially left the house, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. No fireworks, no satisfaction, just stillness. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying something heavy. That night, I sat by the lake again. The water was calm, just like me. I didn't need revenge filled with drama or anger. My silence had been enough. I had taken back control in the quietest, smartest way possible, and they never even saw it coming. I didn't need to destroy them. Life was already doing it for me. It was a quiet morning at the cabin when I heard a car pull up outside. At first, I thought it was a delivery or maybe Daniel stopping by, but when I looked through the window, my heart skipped. It was Ethan. I hadn't seen him since the day I came home to find my life on the lawn. He looked nothing like the man I used to know. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes had lost the confidence they once carried. He stood there for a moment, almost unsure of himself, before walking up to the porch. I didn't move. I just watched him through the window until he finally knocked. When I opened the door, the silence between us was heavy. We just stared at each other for a few seconds. His voice broke the stillness. You ruined me, he said, his tone bitter and cracked. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to understand what he thought I had ruined. The house. The money. The comfortable life he built on lies. I stepped aside slightly, letting the cool air fill the space between us. No, Ethan, I said quietly. You did that when you threw me out. He didn't respond. His shoulders dropped, and I could see the guilt flicker across his face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, but that feeling faded quickly. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here because his world had fallen apart, and he needed someone to blame. He started talking fast, saying how Grace had left, how the bank had taken the house, how he had nowhere to go. He tried to twist the story, to make himself the victim, but his words didn't reach me anymore. I had spent too long breaking free from his version of the truth. I stayed calm and let him talk until he finally stopped. Then I said, "You built your life on lies, Ethan. You hurt the people who loved you and trusted you. That's not something I did to you. That's something you did to yourself." He looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. Maybe he didn't. The woman standing in front of him wasn't the same one he used to control. I had found peace, and that peace made me stronger than any argument could. When he tried to step closer, I shook my head. "You need to leave," I said softly but firmly. For a second, it looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he turned around and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of the past finally lift. I remembered the night he had locked me out of my own home, the pain, the humiliation. Now it was my turn to close the door, not out of anger, but out of peace. He had destroyed himself with his own choices. I didn't need revenge or an apology. Just that quiet moment, standing on my porch, closing the door with my own hand, was enough. The mornings at the cabin are my favorite part of the day. The air feels fresh, the water looks calm, and the world seems still. I sit by the window with a warm cup of coffee and watch the sun slowly rise over the lake. The light touches everything, the trees, the water, the walls of my small home, and reminds me that peace can grow even after pain. My life now is quiet, but it's mine. I no longer wake up with anxiety or wait for someone else's moods to decide how my day will go. I decide that for myself. I work from my little desk near the window, spend afternoons walking by the water, and sometimes just sit outside, listening to the wind move through the trees. It's simple, but it's everything I need. At night, I light a small fire and read. Sometimes I think about everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the loss. But instead of anger, I feel calm. What used to hurt now feels distant, like an old dream I've already woken up from. I understand now that revenge isn't always loud or cruel. Sometimes it's silent and peaceful, the kind that doesn't destroy but rebuilds. Ethan and Grace don't cross my mind much anymore. I don't need to know where they are or what they're doing. Their choices caught up to them, just like life always does. I didn't have to make anyone pay. I just had to stop letting their actions define me. That's something I learned the hard way. My father once told me, "Your peace is your power." I didn't understand that before. I thought love meant giving everything, even when it left me empty. Now I know peace means giving to yourself too, time, care, forgiveness. I built this home again from the pieces they tried to break. Not the same house, but the same heart, healed and stronger. Some evenings, I walk down to the dock and let my feet dangle over the water. The reflection of the sky ripples below me, and I smile. I think of how far I've come from the night I stood in the rain, locked out of my own home, feeling like my world had ended. In truth, that night was the beginning of something new. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them pain. I just wish them the silence they once gave me, so they can sit with themselves and see what they lost. Because sometimes the real payback isn't revenge. It's peace. It's waking up every day in a place that's yours. It's knowing you survived what was meant to break you and came out softer, wiser, and free. Now, I don't look back. The past doesn't own me anymore. I built my life again, piece by piece, and filled it with things that can't be taken: peace, strength, and self-respect. And that, more than anything, is the closure I always needed.